It's been 3 years since chanting protesters and police clad in body armor took over Portland's streets during the racial justice protests of 2020. I know some of us were out on the front lines, but I think most people remember those nights through the images that were captured by photojournalists and documentarians. They were out there, mixed among the protesters, dodging rubber bullets and clouds of tear gas. Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with documentary photographer Ryan Dundon and Oregonian senior photojournalist Beth Nakamura about their experiences documenting those protests. Ryan's new book, Protest City, collects the photos that he shot on those chaotic days. It's Thursday, August 31st. I'm John Notarianni, in for Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Ryan, Beth, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
So I want to go back to, May of 2020 when all of this was starting to get underway. I mean, both of you are seasoned photographers, but did you guys have a sense of what you were getting into when this was starting?
No, I guess not. I mean, I don't think anybody had a sense that it was going to reach the levels that it did. I guess after that first night, I had a sense that things were going to keep going. So it didn't feel like it was going to be confined to those early days. So.
Yeah, I mean, Beth, you've spent a lot of time shooting all sorts of things. Like, what were those early days like for you?
Yeah, it was a blur. I remember, if I look back, I always was using my phone and shooting video here and there. So I actually have this sort of little video diary in a way, although I never intended it as that. I think I was more witnessing myself, witnessing this thing in a way. So as a result, I have, oodles of little clips on my phone that go back to those early days. And if I look at them, it's a blur. We were sleep deprived for months, if not years. I didn't go every night. I shared that load with, my colleagues. So that kind of skews my perception of it a little bit. If you're not there every night, you don't have as clear a picture. You've got some missing puzzle pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're all sort of in that space of remembering what it was like and sort of having this emotional memory of that time, but also, both of you were there and documenting it. So you have all these images that you pulled together.
True. And the image represents sort of like, well, here's literally what I saw. But then, your brain can do funny things with memory,
Yeah. How did you decide what to capture? How were you making decisions about what to shoot when you were out there?
I think there was the world and the United States and the role of technology and all the ways in which the culture just continues to move. It changed so much. I remember in the early days, consent was an issue throughout this protest movement, but I had never really experienced that before to the extent that I did now. And I think that has to do with changes in privacy, changes in our relationship to privacy. Cameras were cops throughout, especially later stages of these protests. So I'd be on a bridge with like 8,000+ people, and there would be an expectation that I would ask for consent, which is almost impossible. But I would hold my camera up over my head, and I would just pan. I would literally walk across that front line, and I would be nodding my head with my thumbs like, "Are we okay?" And people would nod yes or no. Like I literally had to do that.
What were your relationships like down there? Your relationships with the protesters? Like, did you have any relationships with the police? Like, how did you guys manage that?
No, I didn't. I made sure I was not having any kind of relationships with anybody. I mean, I guess looking back, so the protesters could see, they could observe our behavior on the ground and see, decide for themselves who they wanted to talk to and whether they wanted to talk to, and their relationship, it would change.
Was that the same for you, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a community, it was a culture for 3 months. So it was a lot of the same people every night. And it was almost like showing up for work, like, hey, clocking in, here you go. And that was, there was that camaraderie with the journalists, but also for those of us who were friendly with some of the activists, we had that same thing. I think the nights went on, and there's definitely people Portland's a small town. I see people around all the time who I know from the protests, and I think there's a sense that we were all there together at the same place. I do want to go back. Beth and I and other journalists might have gotten tear gassed or batoned once or twice, but for the most part, we know the rules. You stay on the sidewalk, you don't get tackled usually, right? And so, while they were rushing protesters up the street, we're on the sidewalk taking pictures. We were in a much safer position.
And I understand there was a lot of communication among journalists, that you were all out there at the same time, that there was like group chats that were going on. They have, in some cases, persisted long since those protests have ended, of the people who are all out there documenting it. And I wonder what that community has been like for the two of you.
Well, that was an unexpected sort of little delight that came out of all of that chaos. Came this kind of cohesion among a sort of loose band of us who were regulars out there, who sort of played by the journalistic rules, and who together were stronger than separate, which is different than how you would think on a non-conflict situation. That's your competitor, or you tend to just sort of be a little lone wolfish in how you pursue your work. But something else emerged out of this, and I think that's kind of lovely. I even, there's a culture that formed and are still in the Signal chat, actually.
I'd love to hear any stories that you have, that something that sticks in both of your minds as like, this is the night that I just keep thinking of.
Well, it's not the best memory, but I got pretty roughed up by the federal marshal, the marshals one night in front of the courthouse. And Justin Yao, who's a local photographer and videographer, got the video of it. It went like kind of lightweight viral on Twitter, and I got really ragdolled, and a flashbang canister or tear gas canister ignited on my back. I got third-degree burns, and then the cops like holding me under the smoke for like 10 seconds. You can count it on the video, and I was almost passing out before he let me up. They tore my press pass off, pretty flagrant, and I was able to run off and kept working that night. But funny thing is, the next day, people are calling me. They're like, so that my picture's in the New York Times, my picture's on the AP Wire, and this one picture in particular that Noah Berger from the AP took, and it's very dramatic. You can't see my face, but I'm kind of hunched in this cloud of smoke, and there's all these heavily armed, camouflaged agents like looming over me. And that picture ran all over the world with the caption of like, protesters get attacked by police or whatever, federal police. So it was interesting, and to me, it's fascinating. Is the lives that images take and where they go, to be on that other side of the lens inadvertently for this picture that moved around the world.
Yeah, well, I want to hear what you remember too, Beth. But first, let's take a quick break.
Wait, are you gaming? On a Chromebook?
Yep. It's got a high-res 120Hz display, plus this killer RGB keyboard. And I can access thousands of games anytime, anywhere.
Stop playing.
What?
Get out of here.
Huh?
Yeah, I want you to stop playing and get out of here so I can game on that Chromebook.
Got it.
Discover the ultimate cloud gaming machine, a new kind of Chromebook.
All right, Beth, what about you? What do you remember from those days?
I was just thinking back to, things that stand out about the protests, or now looking back, like I drive by Ventura Park and I just think of that 100th night, and that's a little piece of land that will still give me chills. I hear that song Guillotine in my mind. I don't know if you remember that, Ryan, by The Coop. And like, if I heard that song on a protest night, I knew that I was in for a long night. That was sort of like, ready to rumble. If you listen to the lyrics of that song, it's like, oh boy, I'm not going to be sleeping tonight. Or if I hear Kendrick Lamar, sometimes it's just a little piece of audio that will, just bring me back. It's like sensory memories, or, a park that just looks so benign now, but looking back was the site of such strife, like Ventura Park. And you have that picture, Ryan, of that guy's shoe, that guy who got, you remember the Molotov cocktails right outside the park on night 100? And then you have that lone shoe.
Because I got there late.
That's right.
I showed up that night, nobody there. Totally like empty, and there's except for like all the trash, and there's this one burned shoe. I'm like, something happened. So I took that picture, but ended up finding everybody a few blocks away. But yeah, so that was the 100th night of protest. There'd been this kind of buildup, there was this, I think the countdown, people started counting nights like 30 nights into it. So it was like, there was already this setup, like how many nights can we go? And so night 100 was always going to be a big night, but I was late. And I know there was like thousands of people in that park before I got there, like a really big turnout. And then there was a standoff, and then there were Molotovs thrown, which is what got everything cleared pretty quickly. So it was interesting to see these things play out in different parts of the city and the way law enforcement reacted downtown versus, residential Far East Portland by Ventura Park or up on Lombard in North Portland. And that, night 100 was a night that a lot of people were getting tear gassed in their homes in that neighborhood. And just
Beth, you're nodding. It sounds like that resonates for you too.
Well, yeah, everything he's saying, it's vivid. They were in the park for, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes. I mean, there was always sort of a little warm up. There would be this kind of, thing forming between everyone. You could kind of feel it happen. Little slow burn, slow escalation, and then boom, they were out there on the street. Well, they were met by riot police. I think immediately a riot was declared. It was just instant chaos. And then Molotov cocktails. I mean, they were so close to us. What stays with me about that night was we didn't really know what was going to happen. I suddenly just saw all these massive flames and things being thrown. And I thought, are we going to get the shit bombed out of us here tonight? Like, we didn't know. There was no script. It was just kind of like in the early days, we didn't know. Those were the days, I don't even think we had a vaccine then. And we were kind of like guinea pigs for we became probably a data point for people who were studying, the transmissibility or whatever the word is about this, like we didn't know if we were going to die. We didn't have any of that information. Right? Do you remember?
Yeah, no, I mean, COVID was a concern, but even at that point, that was the first week of September. So you're coming off the end of August when people were getting shot and killed downtown Portland during protests.
I mean, it's wild. This was 3 years ago, and you two are talking about it like it was yesterday. It is just so vivid in your brains. And Ryan, you especially, I'm sure you've been spending a ton of time thinking back over this and going back over this and talking about this, because you did just put out this book of your photography from the time. And I'm wondering like what you're finding, what looks different, what you're learning about it, or if you feel like this whole experience changed you in any way.
Yeah, I think it probably changed me. My life looks a lot different now. That's for sure. But it's hard to say. It's like, people are like, the protest messed up Portland, but then it's like, no, COVID messed up Portland. I don't know. One of those things got me. I'm not sure which one, but no, it's just like, things move on anyway. But what's great about putting this book together, and a real privilege to put this together with Oregon State University Press, was the time. We worked on the book for 2 years, so a lot of editing and going back over those pictures and conversations with people about how these pictures are fitting together and what they're saying now, 1, 2, 3 years later. Pictures always have a longer life. We talk about the meaning of images shifting over time. And, I think like these are historical events, these are significant events, and these pictures have a historical value. But, you go back 3 years later and you see different things, or you see different frames jumping out at you. Maybe the more subtle frames, the more nuanced frames that you didn't find the first time around. Sometimes stronger or saying different things.
What about you, Beth? How does it look now to you 3 years out?
Yeah, I don't know about my own work. I mean, it's interesting to be here with Ryan, whose work early on really caught my attention. Ryan himself caught my attention, actually, because I just couldn't believe his work when I first started seeing it. Maybe I think, my favorite work to come out of the protest. It's unvarnished, and that gives it a real authenticity. You feel like you really were there. This is incredibly honest work. It's a little bit undone. There's something so fresh about every part of this that I love it, and I'm glad to be here in conversation.
Well, again, thank you too for being here and for talking me through everything that you saw back then. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Well, that's all for us today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend about it or rate us or leave us a review. I'm John Notarianni, in for Claudia Meza. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a lot more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.